24 people walked into an experiment. They were screened by psychologists, tested for mental illness, emotional instability, criminal history. Every single one came back clean. And if you had been there that summer, college-aged, mentally healthy, no record, no flags, you would have qualified too. After only 6 days of research, the researchers shut everything down. In the summer of 1971, a psychologist at Stanford University named Philip Zimbardo wanted to answer a question that sounds almost too simple to study. Is cruelty something people are, or something they become? He placed an ad in a local newspaper, $15 a day for male college students willing to participate in a 2-week study on prison life. 75 people applied. Zimbardo spent weeks narrowing them down. Psychological interviews, personality tests, background checks. He kept the 24 who showed 0 flags for anything. Then he flipped a coin. 12 became prisoners. 12 became guards. That was it. That was the entire basis for which role you'd spend the next 2 weeks inside. A 50-50 chance, heads or tails. The prisoners were told to wait at home on a Sunday morning, not told when, just to wait. Then real Palo Alto police officers showed up at their doors, real squad cars, real handcuffs, real neighbors watching from front porches as they were read their rights, put in the back of a car, and driven to a police station to be booked and fingerprinted, then blindfolded. Then driven to the basement of the Stanford Psychology building, which had been converted, room by room, into a working prison. They were given numbers, not names, numbers. Their clothes were taken. They were given smocks to wear, a chain locked around one ankle. The experiment hadn't officially started yet. The guards were given almost no instructions, maintain order, no physical harm. Everything else, every decision about how to treat another human being, was left entirely to them. They were given khaki uniforms, wooden batons, and mirrored sunglasses so no prisoner could ever see their eyes. By the second morning, something had already shifted. One guard started waking prisoners at 2 in the morning for no reason, not under any instruction, not as retaliation for anything. He started doing it because it felt like what a guard would do. Head counts at 2 a.m., head counts at 3 a.m. Prisoners standing in the dark, reciting their ID numbers until the numbers were perfect. He later said he wasn't angry at them, wasn't sure why he started. It had just seemed natural. That word, natural, is the thing worth holding on to, because everything that happened after it followed the same logic. Not orders, not anger, just a slow, quiet sense that this was simply how things worked now. On day 2, the prisoners rebelled. They barricaded their cell doors with mattresses and refused to come out. The guards on shift looked at each other. What happened next, nobody had planned, discussed, or suggested. One guard grabbed a fire extinguisher and shot freezing CO2 through the cell doors. They stripped the prisoners. They put the ringleaders into solitary, a closet barely large enough to stand in, with the door shut and the light off. And then one guard did something that stopped Zimbardo cold when he reviewed the footage. He created a privilege cell. He took 3 prisoners he'd decided were least responsible for the rebellion, moved them into a better space, gave them their clothes back, better food, let them wash. Then, after 24 hours, he quietly mixed them back in with everyone else. The other prisoners immediately assumed those 3 had talked, had given something up to earn the treatment. The trust inside the cells collapsed completely, overnight, with nothing but an implication to trigger it. No researcher had suggested it. No protocol included it. A 22-year-old with a wooden baton and a pair of mirrored sunglasses had, in less than 48 hours, independently invented psychological warfare. But that wasn't the moment that changed everything. The moment that changed everything came on day 4, and almost nobody talks about it. By day 3, something had happened to the prisoners that had nothing to do with the guards. They had stopped using their names, not because they were told to. They had simply stopped. They referred to themselves and each other by their numbers. When researchers interviewed them in character, some of them, healthy, screened, normal college students, forgot that leaving was an option, forgot that the door at the end of the corridor led back to a world where they were people with lives and histories and faces other people recognized. One prisoner, number 8612, started screaming, uncontrolled, sustained, broken screaming, followed by crying that he couldn't stop. The research team watched through the observation window and quietly discussed whether he was performing. Whether this was an act to get released early, he wasn't performing. They let him go. And once he was gone, the remaining prisoners were told that 8612 had been a manipulator, that he had faked a breakdown to escape, that he had cheated the system. Some of them believed it. Some of them started resenting him for getting out. Those same prisoners, who could have walked out themselves at any moment, resented someone for leaving. But none of that was the part that stayed in the research notes longest. The part that stayed was what the guards did on day 4. There was one guard the prisoners had started calling John Wayne. Before the experiment, his file showed nothing unusual, no authoritarian tendencies his tests could point to, no history of cruelty. He was, by every measure, an ordinary person who had been handed a uniform and a pair of sunglasses. By day 4, he was the most methodical of all of them. There is a specific moment documented from that afternoon. He walked down the row of cells slowly. He stopped in front of one prisoner and looked at him for a long time without speaking. Then he said quietly that the prisoner would tell him something. He didn't say what, he just said it and waited. The prisoner said nothing, looked at the floor. The guard nodded, walked to the end of the corridor, turned the lights off. He didn't raise his voice once. That was the thing the other researchers couldn't stop coming back to in their notes. Not the shouting guards, not the ones who seemed to enjoy it visibly. It was the ones who had gone quiet, who had found something colder than anger and were operating from inside it completely calmly, as if this had always been who they were. John Wayne said afterward that he had been acting, that he had based his persona on a movie villain, that it was a performance, a character, something he wore and took off. The prisoners couldn't tell the difference. By the end, neither could some of the researchers. And here's the part almost nobody includes when they teach this experiment. By day 5, it wasn't just the guards who had changed. Zimbardo himself had taken on the role of prison superintendent. He wasn't observing anymore, he was running it. When a rumor spread that number 8612 was coming back with people to break the prisoners out, Zimbardo didn't pause the experiment. He didn't step back and recognize what was happening to his own thinking. He started moving prisoners, repositioning guards, crouching in a basement at midnight, a tenured professor at one of the most respected universities in the world, planning a defense against a jailbreak that existed only as a rumor. The system had absorbed the person who built it. It took someone who had never set foot inside, a graduate student walking in from outside, to look at what was happening and say clearly that it needed to stop. He shut it down on day 6. The footage from the final days is not easy to watch. By that point, some prisoners had stopped making eye contact with anyone, including each other. They moved through the space carefully, the way people move when they are trying not to be noticed. Their voices had gone flat. Not defeated exactly. More like they had decided, somewhere below conscious thought, that having an expression cost too much to maintain. One prisoner, when told the experiment was over, didn't react at first. He stood there, looked at the researcher, and then asked if he could please have his clothes back. When the guards who had been the cruelest were interviewed afterward, most of them said they were disturbed by what they'd found in themselves. Not all, but most. And nearly all of them said the same thing when asked what it had felt like in the moment. Normal, like they were simply doing the job correctly. That sentence has been sitting in the research record for 50 years. Not the cruelty, not the breakdown, the fact that none of it felt like anything other than ordinary. 24 people, a coin flip, 6 days. The researchers came looking for answers about human nature. What they found was a question they never figured out how to close. Which side of the coin are you?